All the neighbors could hear were screams and sirens coming from the Cade household. Then silence. Too quiet for a place where 3 people were still supposed to be alive. The porch light flickered. The front door stood open, untouched, unlocked, as if whoever walked in had been invited. Somewhere inside, a clock kept ticking long after it should have stopped mattering. By morning, the fire had erased the questions, and 5 years later, the man responsible for the silence would be signing documents in a glass office, while the only survivor unlocked his door every morning and called him Sir. Ilara Cade liked arriving early. The building was quieter then, the elevators slower, the hallways still holding on to the night before the noise came in and rearranged everything. She liked the way the office felt before people, like it hadn't made any demands yet. She unlocked the door to the executive floor at exactly 7:45 every morning. Same routine, same steps, same sense of order. Her desk sat just outside Adrian Vale's office, close enough to hear the hum of the city through the glass wall behind him, far enough to feel separate. She kept it neat. A notepad aligned with the keyboard, pens placed parallel, nothing personal on display. It wasn't that she had something to hide, she just preferred not to explain herself. Ilara had learned early that calm was something you built, not something you waited for, so she built it carefully, one quiet morning at a time. By 8:15, she had already reviewed his schedule, flagged the calls he would hate, and prepared the documents he would pretend not to need help with. She knew his habits the way you know weather patterns, by repetition, not intimacy. He liked his coffee black, no sugar. He read emails twice before replying. He paused before speaking, even when he already knew the answer. Adrian Vale was a man known for restraint. When he arrived, he nodded once in greeting, as he always did. "Morning, Ilara." "Good morning, sir." Her voice never shook when she said it. She made sure of that. He passed her desk, paused, then turned back. "You can leave the window open today. It's warmer than it looks." She looked up, surprised. "Thank you." He didn't smile. He rarely did. But his tone was gentle, like the thought had crossed his mind on the way in and stayed there long enough to matter. Little things like that were why working for him felt different. He never lingered too close, never touched her arm to get her attention, never asked questions that crossed into her personal life unless she opened the door herself, which she almost never did. And yet, he noticed everything. He noticed when she stayed late and told her to go home before she asked, not ordered, told. He noticed when she flinched at raised voices during meetings and lowered his own, subtle, controlled. Once, months ago, he had asked if she preferred mornings or evenings. "Mornings," she had said without thinking. He nodded. That explains a lot. She never asked what he meant. Some things were safer left unexplained. Over time, something quiet settled between them, not spoken, not named, but present, like a shared understanding that neither of them were the kind of people who took up space loudly. Ilara told herself it was professionalism, that the way her chest tightened when he said her name was nothing more than familiarity, that the sense of relief she felt when he was in the room came from structure, not affection. She told herself many things, and most days they worked, until the file appeared. It was late afternoon when she noticed it, misplaced among routine paperwork. A thin folder, older than the rest, edges slightly worn, as if it had been handled more than necessary. She hadn't prepared it, she was certain of that. The label was faint but legible. Cade Logistics, 2018. Her breath caught so sharply it surprised her. She hadn't seen that name in years, not written like that, not printed and official, stripped of memory and warmth, and the sound of her father's voice saying it with pride. Her fingers hovered above the folder. She told herself not to open it. She opened it anyway. Inside were transport records, partial, incomplete, numbers that meant nothing on their own, but together they felt wrong. Dates that brushed too close to a time she tried not to revisit, a time when the house went quiet and never recovered. She closed the folder quickly, as if it might burn her. A moment later, Adrian's door opened. "Ilara," he said. She looked up too fast. He noticed. "Are you all ready?" "Yes," she said, too quickly. His eyes moved, not to her face, but to the folder on her desk, just for a second, then away. "Could you bring me the briefing notes?" he asked. "Of course." She stood, heart beating louder than it should have, and handed him the papers. Their fingers didn't touch. They never did. As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "You're a Cade," he said, casually, as if it were a neutral observation. She froze. "Yes," she replied carefully. "My family's name." "I thought so," he said. "I came across it once, years ago." She waited for him to say more. He didn't. She nodded and returned to her desk, every sense suddenly sharpened. The calm she had built that morning felt thinner now, not broken, but strained, like glass under pressure. She told herself it was nothing. Coincidences happened, names repeated, files resurfaced. But as the day wore on, she became aware of something she hadn't noticed before. Adrian watched her more closely now. Not obviously, not in a way anyone else would catch, just enough for her to feel it. That evening, as she shut down her computer and reached for her coat, she paused. The office felt different. Still quiet, still controlled, but no longer untouched. As she turned off the light at her desk, a thought crossed her mind. Uninvited, unwelcome, impossible to ignore. That was the first time she wondered if safety could lie. Ilara did not go home right away that evening. She stayed late, long after the office lights dimmed and the cleaners began their careful circuit through the building. She told herself it was because she had fallen behind on scheduling, that it made sense to finish while everything was quiet. But the truth sat heavier than that. The name had not left her. Cade Logistics, 2018. She replayed the way Adrian had said it, calm, casual, as though it hadn't tightened something in her chest, as though it hadn't pulled a memory loose that she had sealed off carefully, deliberately, for years. When the building finally emptied, she shut down her computer and left without saying goodbye. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. At home, the silence pressed in immediately. Her apartment was small, clean, intentionally sparse. No family photos, no framed memories, just neutral colors and controlled spaces. The kind of place that didn't demand you feel anything when you walked in. She set her keys down, took off her coat, and stood in the middle of the room longer than necessary. Then she opened her laptop. She didn't search her family's name at first. She told herself she was just checking old articles, just revisiting the facts she already knew. A harmless exercise. Closure, maybe. But the cursor blinked patiently, waiting. She typed, "Cade Logistics Fire Investigation." The results loaded slowly. Old headlines, archived reports, words she recognized too well. Tragic accident. Authorities rule out foul play. No suspects identified. She clicked through them one by one. The facts hadn't changed. They never did. The fire had started late at night. Neighbors reported smoke before flames. The front door had been found open. No signs of forced entry. No items reported missing. It was classified as a burglary gone wrong, though no one could say what had been taken. Ilara leaned back in her chair, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had asked these questions before, years ago. She had pushed and pressed until people began avoiding her calls, until well-meaning voices told her she needed to let it go. So she had. Mostly. But now the questions felt sharper. She scrolled further. Buried deeper were documents she hadn't seen before. Transport manifests, partial logs, redacted names, dates that made her pause. The week before the fire. Her father's company had flagged something, a discrepancy, a shipment that didn't line up, a signature that didn't belong. She swallowed. Her father had been careful, meticulous. He believed that honesty protected you, that if you followed the rules, nothing bad could touch you. She remembered that belief. She had buried it with him. The more she read, the more something began to bother her. Not just what was there, but what wasn't. Missing pages, incomplete follow-ups, interviews summarized instead of transcribed, conclusions drawn too quickly. It felt unfinished. Her phone buzzed suddenly. She flinched hard enough to knock her chair back. A message from Adrian. "Did you get home safely?" She stared at the screen. It was a simple question, thoughtful, appropriate. Still, her fingers hesitated before replying. "Yes, thank you." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Good," he typed. "It's been a long day." She imagined him at home, wherever that was, surrounded by quiet the same way she was. The thought used to comfort her. Tonight, it unsettled her. She closed the laptop without replying again. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it was shallow and restless, filled with fragments, flickering porch lights, ticking clocks, the sound of paper burning. The next morning, Ilara noticed the change immediately. Adrian was already in his office when she arrived. That was unusual. He rarely came in before her. "Good morning," she said, placing her bag down. "Morning," he replied, looking up from his desk. His eyes lingered just a fraction longer than before. "You're early," she added. "So are you," he said. A pause followed, not awkward, just deliberate. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. She blinked. "Yes." Another lie, small, necessary. He nodded as though satisfied and returned to his work. But throughout the morning she felt it, his attention, quiet but constant, not invasive, not obvious, just present. He asked her to sit in on meetings she usually didn't attend, requested files he could have retrieved himself, watched her carefully when she spoke, as though listening for something beneath the words. When she stood to leave the room, he noticed. When her phone buzzed, his eyes flicked briefly in that direction. She told herself she was imagining it, that once doubt enters, it colors everything. At lunch, she avoided eating at her desk. She needed air, space, a reminder that the world existed beyond glass walls and quiet power. She sat alone in a cafe across the street, stirring a cup of tea she didn't want. Her laptop stayed closed. Her mind didn't. She replayed the moment he'd said her name, the way he'd known it, the ease with which he'd placed it in conversation, as though it never carried weight, as though it never belonged to 3 people who no longer existed. Back at the office, she worked mechanically, efficient, polite, distant. Adrian noticed. "You seem distracted," he said late in the afternoon. "I'm fine," she replied. "You've said that twice today." She looked up, startled. He leaned back slightly in his chair, studying her. "If something's bothering you, you don't have to carry it alone." There it was, the offer. Once it would have softened her, would have made her feel seen. Now it felt like a test. She smiled instead. "Just tired," she said. He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Then he nodded. "Get some rest." That night, she opened her laptop again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She searched deeper, followed document trails, cross-referenced names that had been redacted in public reports but surfaced elsewhere, financial disclosures, corporate filings, archived legal briefs. That's when she saw it. A company Adrian Vale had served as a senior executive for, years before she ever met him, had been listed as a client of Cade Logistics. Not briefly, not incidentally, extensively. Her stomach tightened. She traced the timeline. The discrepancies her father flagged involved shipments tied to that company, missing cargo, altered records, sign-offs that didn't match. And then, silence. The file ended abruptly. 1 week later, her family was dead. Ilara pushed her chair back and stood, pacing the room. She wanted to stop, to close the laptop and pretend she hadn't seen it, but something in her had shifted. This wasn't grief pulling her backward. This was truth pushing forward. At work the next day, Adrian was quieter, more reserved. He asked fewer questions, offered fewer observations, but his presence felt heavier, like a door slowly closing. When she laughed softly at something a colleague said, his gaze snapped up. When she packed her bag to leave, he asked where she was going. "Home," she replied. He hesitated. "Be careful." The words landed strangely. That evening, as she walked through her apartment door, the unease followed her inside. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, breathing slowly. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it. Nothing disturbed, nothing missing. And yet, she crossed the room and opened her laptop, unable to stop herself. She knew now that this wasn't nothing, because if it were nothing, it wouldn't have followed her home. Ilara waited 3 days before reaching out. Not because she didn't want answers, but because once she asked the question, there would be no way to pretend she hadn't heard the reply. She found the name buried in an old article, halfway down the page, quoted only once. A former investigator, not law enforcement anymore, not officially attached to the case, just someone who had asked too many questions and eventually been encouraged to stop. She copied the email address into a blank message and stared at it. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed. She didn't explain everything. She didn't need to. She mentioned the fire, her family's name, the files that didn't line up. She hit send before she could overthink it. The reply came the next night. "I wondered when you might reach out," it read. "I didn't think you ever would." They met in a quiet place, neutral, public, forgettable. A cafe with no music and too much light. The kind of place people chose when they didn't want to be overheard or remembered. The man looked older than she expected. Not worn, just tired, like someone who had learned how expensive truth could be. "I can't tell you everything," he said after they sat. "Some of it was sealed, some of it disappeared, and some of it," he paused, "some of it people made sure stayed quiet." Ilara nodded. She had expected that. "What I can tell you," he continued, "is that your father didn't die because he was careless." Her breath caught. "He was careful," she said automatically. "Too careful." The man watched her closely. That's what made him a problem. He explained it slowly, carefully, as if he were placing fragile pieces on a table between them. Her father had flagged irregularities in shipment logs tied to a corporate client. Not small errors, systemic ones, ones that suggested deliberate falsification. He had been asked, politely at first, to revise his records. He refused. He wasn't loud about it, the man said. Didn't threaten, didn't go public, he just wouldn't cooperate. Ilara felt something twist painfully in her chest. "He thought if he stayed quiet, it would protect his family," she whispered. The man didn't contradict her. "He asked for time," he went on, said he needed legal counsel, said he wouldn't sign anything until he understood what was being asked of him. "And then?" Ilara asked. The man looked down at his hands, and then the fire happened. The cafe felt suddenly too bright, too open. "Was it ordered?" she asked. He hesitated. "I never found proof of an explicit order," he said carefully. "What I found was approval, silence, decisions not to intervene." Her heart sank. "From who?" The man didn't say the name. He didn't have to. "You're working for him now," he said. Ilara stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. She apologized without meeting his eyes and left before she could ask questions she wasn't ready to hear answered. That night, she didn't cry. Grief had already done its damage years ago. This was something else. This was recognition. At work, Adrian noticed immediately. "You've been distant," he said late that afternoon. She looked up from her screen. "Have I?" "Yes," he replied. "You used to stay after meetings, ask follow-up questions. And now?" "And now you leave as soon as they end." She shrugged. "People change." He studied her for a moment. "Is something going on?" he asked. The question felt heavier than it should have. She almost laughed, almost told him everything, almost asked him to explain himself, to deny it, to give her something, anything to hold on to. Instead, she said, "Do you remember how we met?" He blinked. "Of course." "Do you recognize my surname before I ever told you anything about myself?" "Yes," he said carefully. "Why?" He leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced. "I came across it years ago, in a file." "What kind of file?" "A professional one." Her pulse quickened. "Connected to the fire?" The silence stretched. "Yes," he said finally. The word landed like a confession. "You knew it," she said. "I knew of it," he corrected. "Knew of my family," she said. "Knew what happened to them?" "Yes." "And you still hired me?" "Yes." "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. "Because you deserved a chance to build something that wasn't defined by that night." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "That wasn't your decision to make. I know. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" He looked at her then, really looked at her. "I hoped you wouldn't have to." The answer hurt more than a lie would have. She swallowed. "Did you have anything to do with it?" The question hung between them. "No," he said. "I didn't kill them." The words were firm, controlled, practiced. "But?" she asked softly. His jaw tightened. "But I was part of the system that benefited from their silence." Her breath shuddered. "Did you know what would happen?" she asked. He hesitated. "I knew what could happen," he said. "And you let it." He didn't deny it. "I didn't order anything," he said. "I didn't authorize violence." "But you didn't stop it," she said. "I didn't," he admitted. The truth settled heavily between them. It wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices, no shouting, just two people sitting across from each other, finally speaking honestly. "I cared about you," he said quietly. Her chest tightened painfully. "You still do," she said. "Yes. And you still didn't tell me." "I didn't know how," he replied. "And once I realized how much I cared, it became harder." She stood. "I need air," she said. He didn't try to stop her. She walked out of the office and into the hallway, heart pounding, mind racing. Love didn't disappear instantly. It cracked, shifted, became something fragile and dangerous. That night, she dreamed of fire again. But this time, she wasn't outside the house. She was inside, watching. In the days that followed, everything changed without anything visibly changing at all. Adrian became more careful with his words, more distant, as if proximity itself were now a risk. Alara watched him with new eyes. She noticed how often he chose silence over action, how he weighed consequences before compassion, how power had trained him to pause when others would have acted. And she realized something that hurt more than the truth itself. He wasn't cruel, he was worse, he was reasonable. She returned to the cafe one last time. "What happens if I go public?" she asked the investigator. "Then the truth becomes expensive," he said. "For you, for him, for a lot of people. And if I don't, then you'll carry it alone." She left without answering. That evening, Adrian waited for her. "I know what you're thinking," he said. "Do you?" she replied. "You're thinking about consequences," he said, "about what this will cost." She nodded. "I'm thinking about who pays." He met her gaze. "I can't change what happened, but I can take responsibility now." "What does that mean?" she asked. "I'll cooperate," he said, privately. "I'll step down, remove myself." "And the truth?" she asked. He hesitated. "The truth will be managed." The word settled like dust. She realized then that this was as far as he could go. He would stand beside the truth, but never in front of it. She gathered her things and left without another word. At home, she sat in the dark, laptop open, evidence spread before her. Love still pulsed beneath the hurt, but it no longer blinded her. And as she prepared to make her choice, one thought remained painfully clear. He didn't deny the truth, he just stood beside it. Alara didn't sleep the night the proof arrived. It didn't come dramatically. There was no anonymous envelope, no late-night knock, just an email, quiet, unassuming, easy to ignore if she wanted to. She didn't. The subject line read, "You asked what he approved." Her hands were steady as she opened it. That surprised her. Inside was a forwarded chain, old, archived, buried deep enough that it had taken time to unearth. A corporate authorization memo, not ordering violence, not mentioning her family by name, but approving the removal of safeguards, approving delays, approving silence. Her father's name appeared once, just once, flagged, unresolved, deferred. At the bottom was Adrian Vale's signature, not rushed, not hidden, intentional. This was it. Not suspicion, not interpretation, not something that could be explained away by timing or coincidence. This was the shape of the truth. She closed the laptop gently, as though loud movements might fracture what little remained intact. For a long time, she sat on the edge of her bed, hands folded in her lap, breathing carefully. She thought of her father standing at the kitchen counter, reading documents he didn't like, but believed he had to understand. Of her mother reminding him to rest. Of her brother complaining about how boring adults were. They had trusted the world to behave logically. It hadn't. The next morning, Alara went to work as usual. Same routine, same steps, same neutral expression. The calm she had built over months now felt artificial, like something she was borrowing until it was taken back. Adrian noticed immediately. "You look tired," he said. "I didn't sleep," she replied. He hesitated. "Was it about what we talked about?" She nodded. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "we can." She followed him into his office and closed the door behind her. The room felt smaller than it used to. Or maybe she was just more aware of it now, of how insulated it was from consequence. Thick glass, soundproofing, controlled light. Adrian gestured for her to sit. She remained standing. "I found the authorization," she said. His breath caught. For the first time since she had known him, he looked afraid. "You weren't meant to see that," he said quietly. "That's what you approved, not what I was meant to see." He closed his eyes briefly, as if bracing himself. "I didn't know they would die," he said. "But you knew they could," she answered. "Yes." The word was barely audible. "I thought if I stayed out of it, if I didn't interfere, it would be handled quietly. I thought it would resolve itself." "And when it didn't?" He looked at her, really looked at her. "I convinced myself it wasn't my responsibility anymore." The honesty hurt worse than denial. She felt something tear inside her, not sharply, but slowly, like fabric pulled too far. "Say it," she said. He swallowed. "I'm sorry." The words were careful, measured. She waited. "I'm sorry I didn't act. I'm sorry I didn't protect them. I'm sorry I let something irreversible happen and then learned how to live with it." "And me?" she asked. His voice softened. "I never intended to involve you." "But you did," she said. "Every day I worked here, every time you looked at me and said my name. I cared about you. I still do." She laughed quietly. It surprised them both. "That's the cruelest part," she said. "You mean it." He stood, moving closer, but stopped himself before crossing the space between them. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that." "Then what are you asking?" "For time, for discretion, for us to decide what happens next without destroying everything." Her heart clenched. "Everything?" she repeated. "Or everyone?" He didn't answer. They stood in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on them both. "I loved you," she said suddenly. The admission felt dangerous, necessary. His breath hitched. "I know," he whispered. "And I still do," she continued. "That's what makes this impossible." She turned toward the door. "Ilara," he said. She stopped. "If you go public, this won't just affect me. There are people, innocent people, who will be pulled into this, careers destroyed, families damaged." She looked back at him slowly. "You mean the way mine was?" The words landed hard. He had no defense left. "I'm asking you not to make this worse," he said quietly. She considered him then, not as her boss, not as the man she had loved, but as someone who had been tested and chosen silence. "I won't make it better by lying." That night, Adrian came to her apartment. He hadn't been there before. She let him in without a word. They sat across from each other, the space between them charged and fragile. "I'll step down," he said, publicly. "I'll cooperate with an internal review. I'll take responsibility." "And the truth?" she asked. He looked away. "It won't survive exposure," he said, "not fully." "So it will be shaped," she replied, "contained." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "I need you to understand something," she said. "If I stay silent, I become part of it." "You're not responsible for what I did," he said. "No," she agreed, "but I would be responsible for what I allow." He reached for her hand, hesitated, let it fall. "I loved you," he said. The past tense hurt. "So did I," she replied. "And that's why I'm asking you," he continued, "not as an executive, not as someone powerful, as someone who knows me." She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city moved on. Cars passed, lights changed, people made choices that mattered only to themselves. "My family trusted the system," she said. "They believed if they did the right thing, someone else would protect them." She turned back to him. No one did. She picked up her phone. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Choosing," she said. She sent the email, attached the documents, forwarded the chain, included a brief message. This is what was approved. This is what was ignored. When she looked up, Adrian's face had gone pale. "It's done," she said. He closed his eyes. For a moment she thought he might be angry. He wasn't. He looked broken. "I never wanted it to come to this," he said. "Neither did they," she replied. The investigation moved quickly after that, quietly, efficiently. Adrian was asked to step aside pending review. His office was sealed, his access revoked. There was no spectacle, no headlines yet, just consequences unfolding behind closed doors. Ilara continued coming to work for a few days, long enough to hand over responsibilities, to clear her desk, to leave without drama. Adrian didn't contact her. She didn't expect him to. On her last day, she stood outside the building longer than necessary, watching people pass without noticing her. She felt hollow, lighter, heavier. At home, she packed away the last of the evidence, saved copies where they couldn't be erased. And as she closed the folder, the finality settled in. She had chosen truth over comfort, memory over love, the dead over the living. And as she sat alone in the quiet she had once worked so hard to build, the cost became unmistakably clear. She chose what was right and lost what was left. Adrian Vale was arrested on the Tuesday morning. There were no cameras waiting, no raised voices, no spectacle. Two men arrived at the building just after 9. They spoke softly at reception, showed identification, took the elevator up alone. Ilara didn't see them. She found out the way most people did, through a brief internal email later that day, carefully worded, non-committal, pending investigation, temporary measures. The office reacted the way offices always do, whispers first, then speculation, then a collective, cautious return to work. By the end of the week, his name was spoken less often. By the end of the month, it was barely spoken at all. The media covered it briefly, a few headlines, a few panels of experts explaining what they didn't know, words like alleged and systemic failure and ongoing review. Then something else happened, something newer, louder, easier to consume, and the world moved on. Ilara watched it all from a distance. She took a leave of absence at first, said she needed time. No one questioned it. Sympathy was easier than curiosity. When she returned, her office was empty. The glass walls remained, but the desk was cleared, the chair pushed in, the light always off. She passed it every morning without stopping. Her own desk felt temporary now, as though she were already gone and simply hadn't packed yet. On her third day back, her phone buzzed. One message, from Adrian. She stared at the screen longer than she meant to. I understand if you never want to speak to me again. I just needed you to know. I never blamed you. She didn't open it. She turned the phone face down and left it there, unanswered. Not because she was angry, because some doors, once closed, did not need to be reopened to prove they were shut. She submitted her resignation quietly. No dramatic letter, no accusations, just a clean notice. Professional, final. Her supervisor asked if she was sure. Yes, she said. Is there anything we can do to change your mind? She shook her head. No, she replied. There isn't. On her last day, she packed her desk slowly. The notepad, the pens, the mug she'd never used. She found a sticky note tucked into the back of a drawer, one she didn't remember writing. Remember to leave before it gets too quiet. She folded it carefully and slipped it into her pocket. When she turned in her access badge, no one asked where she was going next. Outside, the city looked the same, busy, indifferent, alive. She walked without direction for a while, past buildings she no longer had any reason to enter, past cafes where she'd once watched the street and pretended not to think. The quiet she had worked so hard to build had followed her, but it felt different now, less protective, more honest. At home, she opened the windows and let the air in. She deleted old emails, archived documents she no longer needed to revisit, stored the evidence somewhere safe, untouched but not erased. She cooked a simple meal and ate it standing up. Later, she sat on the floor with her back against the couch and let the silence settle. It wasn't peaceful, but it was real. She thought about Adrian, not as he had ended, but as he had been, measured, controlled, capable of kindness, capable of restraint, capable of choosing silence. She did not hate him. That surprised her. She understood him now in a way love had never required her to. Understanding did not soften the loss, it clarified it. That night, she slept without dreams. In the weeks that followed, people stopped asking questions. She stopped being careful with her answers. I needed to leave, she would say, and that was enough. She changed her routine, took different routes, let herself be seen in places she'd once avoided. She wasn't rebuilding yet, She was learning how to stand in the absence of what she'd lost. Sometimes, late at night, she wondered what would have happened if she had chosen differently, if she had stayed silent, if she had allowed the truth to be reshaped, if she had kept the man and buried the rest. The thought never lingered. She knew who she would have become, and she knew she would not have survived it. One evening, months later, she passed the building where she used to work. The executive floor was dark. She didn't stop. She kept walking, not because it no longer mattered, but because she had finally stopped living inside it. She had not been rewarded. She had not been restored. She had not been comforted. What she had gained was smaller, quieter, harder to explain. The ability to look at herself without flinching. She had chosen memory over denial, truth over affection, the dead over the living. And as she disappeared into the evening, unnoticed, unaccompanied, the shape of her decision settled fully into place. She didn't win, she just stopped lying to herself. Some stories don't end with answers, they end with choices. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause or feel something you didn't expect, then you're not alone. Subscribe for more slow burn audio stories about truth, love, and the cost of both. New stories every week. And thank you for listening all the way to the end.